Okay, so we'll talk about the lesser weathers of Beethoven. It has the character of, let's see here, I forget.
Henry Miller. And that was
Yes,
the guy's
Henry Miller,
real
right.
name. That was his real name. He was this queer black guy I worked with
See,
for.
I thought he might have been a composite.
No, no, he was. That was his real name, Henry Miller. He was gay. He was black. He was male. He loved classical music more than blues or jazz. Not that he didn't like that, but he it was odd. And he was a Christian, and he was gay, and he died of something beginning with the letter A, but it wasn't AIDS. He died of asbestos, some kind of resulting from his. So, and I thought this was really good, and the fact that it was Henry Miller would allow me to take a shot at that the asshole writer, and so it just seemed like a really good uh, thing to do. And then because I know of all the ones classical composers they liked was Beethoven, I said, well, let me choreograph the Beethoven. So I opened the play with the Fifth Symphony, bum 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 bum, and then we see what's going on, bum bum bum, and have this at the doctor's office where he's getting his terminal diagnosis. So and it starts off even before that where we see that famous, there's the angry Beethoven, posing for that famous painting. I forget who it was, but I have that painting. So have that being shown there, and then have the Henry Miller character walk into the face so that his face becomes that of Beethoven, and then we hear bum 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 bum. And so I'm thinking like how many. I mean, musicals have to be choreographed, but how many non-musicals that just have these little intro? Well, most dramatic pieces don't have use music in the way that I've been using it. Otherwise, they'd be musicals. I don't do musicals, but have that and choreograph that to something the way you would in a film. Because I could imagine a Cassavetes or a Woody Allen or a Kubrick or certainly a Scorsese choreographing that. And what better way than to have someone get a terminal diagnosis with bum 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 to start?
And when thinking of your plays, mine doesn't naturally drift towards, say, a Beer or Williams. It's mostly films. I thought this was more along the lines of like an operatic Ikari, Kurosawa instead of anyone in the dramatic arts. I also think that this is probably the best play of yours that I've read thus far. I thought the music was used excellently throughout. The fact that it's just that one composer too that's played throughout it, and the contrast between the music and the characters themselves. Henry Miller too. I initially didn't like him, but I gradually found that he was a good person for the most part, and I thought that it was a good thing to not make him a gay character. I didn't think that, having read the rest of your drama, that you would, but this is just something that most playwrights would have, if not dealing with trite things like coming out scenes, would probably bring out some kind of aspect of his gay lifestyle. More focus would be put on his Johns than the fact that he worked in a grocery store and how he had a work ethic. Also, the relationship between him and his family members, George, and what was the other one's name?
Hetty.
Hetty, right? Yes, they have a lot of back and forth between the two of them, and even though they're of the same spawn, the differences between George and Henry are made manifest by how they communicate with each other. How stupid!
Hold on one second. Jessica, I'm doing this here. You want me to have the door open, and you're flushing the toilet.
Sorry, I had to pee.
Well, go to the other bathroom. We got another bathroom. We shut the light off here.
You gotta leave that in.
Yeah. Anyway, see, I mean, Henry, the real Henry was gay, so why wouldn't I have that in? But yeah, and it's not that I would not. If, for example, I had known more about his personal life, I mean, there's one scene where we learn that he has had a few live-in lovers over the years, and Danny ends up meeting one of them. But it's just sort of, oh, hi, how are you, how you doing, kind of thing. It's but the homosexuality of Henry Miller is not the point. It's not his being gay is just a fact of life, and that's the way that most gay art is not, unfortunately. So it's about him dying. It's about him coming to grips with stuff, and it's also about Danny's admiration of him. We see in the background Big Al makes an appearance at some point, or he's mentioned, I think. he doesn't make an appearance, but he's mentioned. And I had the earlier play about Big Al, and then I have this play. So these are two men who are 25, 30 or more years older than me, who I worked with, in my early adulthood. One certainly is dead as Henry. Big Al is most likely dead, I would say, by now. And the influence that they had on this guy and Henry's work ethic, when they do have a funny little scene where they're talking about chocolate eclairs and the custards and whatnot. But that it's a human scene, and it's to be humanized. And I've sent this play around probably at least to 7 or 8 theaters thus far. Those that want black plays, but my guess is it's not gonna be black enough for them. And also, if I send it to a gay theater, it's probably not going to be gay enough for them.
The conversation between Henry, Eddie, and George is one of the most amusing, where they have the Beethoven rage over a penny over them, and George especially becomes increasingly more aware that rage over a penny is mocking them as they're speaking. They also have some interesting conversations. That's where Henry posits greater weathers of Beethoven or something.
Yeah.
Something to that extent, that artists see things on a different scale than the rest of society.
Yeah.
And that when he listens to Beethoven, that's sort of how he feels he sees it then. He sees it through how Beethoven sees the world, or hears the world.
Well, the brother George, Henry has a soliloquy. I'm just skimming through it. Henry has a soliloquy. But most of the play is basically Henry and Danny talking at some point and whatnot. And we get the McLuhan poem that is put in there. We get the brother afterwards.
He comes back later as death too.
Yeah, or he's dead, or whatever he's supposed to represent. He's more of an everyman, if you will, than Henry, because Henry is probably a Joey, although he's probably smart enough, as portrayed in this play, to not waste his time trying to be an artist, because he just doesn't really have it. But because he knows that the Beethovens have the greater weathers, and more mortals have the less weathers. So the title about these lesser weathers of Beethoven is presumably Henry's way of trying to say that even on his best days or his worst days, Beethoven is still probably somehow above them, and it's an equation in the mind of someone who doesn't quite get it as to what those who do have it, greater depth, greater intellect, greater talent, must have to feel. And I know that's something that a lot of artists have too. I know Jessica sometimes, like we were out walking today, or sometimes when she's in her moods, she'll be asking, like, what do non-creative people do when they have a lot of time? They just sit around, they watch porno, they just play video games, or they just talk on the phone or text each other endlessly. It's like, for me, any free time I get, I'm writing, or I'm talking to you, or I'm doing this, that, or the other thing, other than the stuff I have to do, like mow the lawn or whatever it might be. But what you have to then wonder, what people who are not creative must think about the creative people. They're probably like, why do they spend all their time doing all this? Well, if you want to know why a Beethoven's a Beethoven, or a Dan Schneider's a Dan Schneider, or a Stanley Kubrick is a Stanley Kubrick, is because they're constantly thinking about these things. These things have to be in their mind. And so that's sort of, I guess, the main thrust of that play. And the Henry character is, as I said, a good one, because there is something about him that we don't. There's aspects to him that certainly are not sketched about, and that's when you do a play, especially a drama. I think that's about 30,000. So it's a fairly long drama compared to most. 30,000. It's let me see, how many pages typewritten is it here?
It's around the length of Hamlet.
Yeah. So let's see here, word count 32. So it's 32,000 words, and it's how many pages here? It's 59. So that would be 60. So 120. So that's 120 pages, 120 minutes. So that's about a 2-hour play. given standard stuff. But so say a 2-hour play, that's pretty. That's a fairly long chunk, although it's not nearly as long as some of the first couple of plays I did.
And when you mentioned the McLuhan poem, Danny has a scene with George where he's talking about writing mediocre to so-so poems, but he just knows he has something within him, that kernel that only he can see, that he can bring out great artly. And then the McLuhan poem comes out because he wants to show Henry exactly what became of him, that he's the best poet now at this time.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things you can do. You can go back in time, back and forth in time, and I play with that in a lot of the plays. The Henry character, the putting to music with the Beethoven. That there's a lot of things, but as I've been doing some of these last few plays, I've been trying to get away from using music all the time and do other things. So you don't want to go back to the same thing. You want to try different things, different lighting techniques, putting things in different ways, mixing this and that. Having a couple of the last plays that I did had a bit more absurdist elements in them. The poem I did on my mother's death has this woman that only she can see, but there's no actor playing it, but she can see the woman in blue. We had the play with the guy wandering on the hotel and trying to not remember what has happened in his past. The one after that one, An Eye Other Than Human. I don't know if you've read that one. That's the Twilight Zone one with people from my real life. Acting almost like memories within a brain, the two halves of the brain. I'm trying to do that. But anyway, so the Henry Miller play is one of my favorite plays because Henry Miller is one of my all-time favorite people. He's certainly in the top 10 of people that I liked or loved over the years, just as a human being. And the fact that I found out probably a handful of years after his death that he had died sometime in the early O's, that's one of the reasons I do those dioramas, and I've tried here and there. I'll probably try maybe once I hopefully get another new job in the early part of next year, maybe try around again to interview some other people. But a lot of people don't want to talk about themselves. He would have been interesting to interview, but the time's gone. But that's what a great artist can do. People who could watch this play 500 years from now in a theater around Jupiter, one of the moons of Jupiter, will be able to know that this man existed, and that was his real name, Henry Miller. I think I call him Henry Crawford Miller. I don't remember what his real middle name was, but I just gave him a middle name just to, I don't know, make him
sense. He has a scene too where he speaks to the audience as well.
Yeah.
While he's listening to Beethoven. I thought that was an interesting thing. I think that I'm not sure if it's in that section or later where you say that parts are part of the universe or something to that extent, and that's why you use them in your plays.
Yeah, I think George is farting at that point.
Yes, that's it, right. And George is the one who makes that cogent point.
Yeah. Well, and that's the kind of thing, though, that philosophically is an important thing in the sense that, why would you put it in? Well, I mean, in Ozu plays, people fart. People do. Now, you have to use it. You can't just go back to it like I watched Amacorn too, and they used farting in that as well. Yeah. And so it exists. Absurd things exist in the cosmos. Use them, but put them in some kind of context. All these plays, like I said, most people are fairly dull. This Eve Green character that we were just talking about in the Second Woman, she's a rock singer who's a drunkard. I mean, artists who are drunks or drug users or whatever, that's not particularly, that's not new. There's nothing. But how to put her in a context, I can't necessarily make her that interesting, but by parallaxing her with these even more ridiculous people that are chanting at the poetry things, with the weird thing, the play begins with Danny. The first scene ends with him telling her to get up off her knees, and he sees someone watching him. Well, this goes back to the true life with the idea of some of these people that were watching me or picked me up when I was in the teen gang, and there were always some odd things going on in my life, especially as a youngster, whether these were paranormal things or whether these were things related to the gang or to other criminal types that I knew. This opens up and it leaves. And as you read these plays, especially if you read them in order, some people will have their own play to start out with, like the Megan Morrow character, who's a total fiction based on the Megan Fowler's character. She will come. She has her own play. She's number one. Then the next time she appears, she's one of four main characters. And then in the next play that she appears in, the Maydeen play, she's a supporting character. Who's just sort of there to help move the story along. Some other characters start out as minor, and then they later get the Maren Jensen character in The Second Woman becomes the main character 5 plays later. And so these characters will wax and wane, and some of them may appear just as background. The Linda Burton character in The Second Woman, the fat woman, eventually, probably not for a few dozen plays more, I'm going to do a play on her. And I know the perfect title, called 5 by 5, 5 feet high by 5 feet wide. This play about this lonely fat woman. But that's something that I mean, I've done 23 plays now. I've got probably over 20 of them that I have the basic outlines with. So in this first cycle of plays that I'm doing, that'll probably go till next summer or so, I'll probably end up with between 45 and 50 plays. Then I'll come back, and hopefully by that time I'll be out of my current job, and I'll write a book about that.
I see you underestimate your number.
What do you mean?
Well, in the sense that you're writing these in 4 days, and you're claiming that you'll have 45 plays. I think by next summer you may have 100 or so.
Well, but if I get another job and other things, that they're going to slow down. It's why I'm doing them as much as I can. And the thing is, as you do every play, the next play gets harder. Not harder in the sense to tell the story, but to tell it in a way that you're not going back to the same well, that you're not dipping back into using the same devices. So you have to push yourself. And that's a good thing, but it is exhausting. I mean, now 23 plays in, I know that another 10, 15 plays, there's no way I'm going to be able to do them necessarily in 4 or 5 days, unless I just get that sudden insight for some of them. So they will take a little bit longer because you have to ruminate on them so that you don't repeat yourself. So anyway,
I did want to discuss the ending of the play before we move on to the next one. I thought that this is probably some of the richest writing that I read from you since that scene in Norwegian where Frank notices the shoelaces tied up on wires. Where you're using the scene, it goes the way it was and the way it should have been.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the effective device. First, the first scene is very comedic in the sense that Eddie finds Henry dead, and then he has Max, this dope, who comes in and needs to make a sandwich.
Yeah.
While all this is going on.
That's the way that's the way, unfortunately, a good man will end up. My mom, I remember the way my dad died, so I figured, let's have, Henry is just found, and then the super, is hungry, so while the sister, he's going to go out and call the coroner's office and whatnot. And that's the way it would have happened, probably. That's the absurd way, that a good, decent man probably ended up, he probably didn't have that much money. Maybe his lover didn't have any money. His sister, maybe all they could do was just, have him cremated for $500, $800, whatever it would be back then. And then, toss him in the Atlantic Ocean or wherever it might be. Or he ended up, in some little urn somewhere. And then the way it should have been is Danny's quote unquote, if you will, platonic love scene with Henry, trying to assure him that he was a good guy, that he meant something, and that this play is the proof of that.
Yeah, he soliloquizes well. Lauren Isley quotes go off as well as Beethoven. It is very Beethoven-esque in that there's much complexity to this section.
Well, and that's the thing.
Because of what came before with the former scene, there is a tinge of sadness throughout this. All this is not how it really was.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is, I took a chance here. I think that if I ever get an interest in this play being made, I think that I know the Lauren Isley Society and the people. I'm sure that if they read the play, they would allow me to use that. I mean, I could remove the Isley quotes and it would still be effective. But the Isley quotes, I don't see why they would not want to use in this great work of art, of great pieces of writing from this man that are contrapuntal to the Beethoven and the dramatic thing going on. To me, all three of them work together, and they really pack a wallop. But we'll see. But and then Beethoven plays on as the stage darkens about Danny Wagner. So that's how it ends. And it ends with him here. Where are you? And Danny says here. And then Henry gulps. What is that? What is? Because when people are dying, they, from everything I've known and when I've seen people dying, both people dying violently or my own dad dying, everything disappears. It goes away, the blackness comes in, and they can't hear, they can't see, no matter how much you shout, everything starts shutting down. So his chest rises upward, and Henry is dead. In the next minute, Danny sighs, breathes heavily, checks for a pulse, and then pulls the bedsheet over his face and pushes down on his chest so the Henry actor exhales. After a few seconds, and dejectedly, Danny says, here, Beethoven plays on as the stage darkens about Danny Wagner. So life goes on for him, Danny, but it doesn't for Henry.